So here I have this amazing shop that I built, but it's an utter disaster.
Setting up any new workspace is daunting. There's just simply too many things to do.
Like setting up dust collection.
But one of the biggest impact items you can start with is some shop cabinets.
And depending on your setup, that's gonna look very different. But for me, this entire wall you see behind me is gonna be cabinets from wall to wall. And yes, I realize I have a perfectly good set of shop cabinets in the garage where my shop used to be that I could just move over there and we'd be done. I built these cabinets about 7 years ago, and to be honest, they're perfectly fine. I've got a full set of plans on these cabinets if you wanna put these in your shop. They've served me very well across a couple of different moves. But I think I'm gonna leave these in here as kind of garage cabinets. But for this shop, since it's a blank slate, I wanna do something a little bit different. So here are my goals. I want a ton of drawer storage. That's number one. Number two is I want to make upper cabinets that are both easier to build and more functional than your standard upper cabinets. And number three, of course, is it's got to look awesome. Now, what those cabinets do is really going to depend on your workflow and your workshop. For me, I know I want to build in a miter station in the lower element of the cabinets. So the miter station gets off this rickety temporary thing we got going on. And I want to take a slightly different approach. You'll see when we get there.
Now, when it comes to lower cabinets, as I've stated before, I'm a drawer guy. I hate doors on lower cabinets. They're just black holes in your shop that eat tools that you are never gonna see again. So, given that preference, I can either go build a ton of drawers myself, which, let's be honest, just takes forever, or I could opt to buy some. I really went back and forth on this, but ultimately decided that buying was the right option for me. But as I searched around, I very quickly realized that there's a gap in the market out there. You can either get super high-end metal listed cabinets, which are extremely expensive, especially to fill up an entire wall like I've got planned. Or you can go the ultra cheap route that are just gonna fall apart after a couple of years. There's really not a solid middle ground option. So I did a ton of research and found a manufacturer overseas who makes very thick gauge steel cabinets with drawers of very high weight capacities. And after 2 months of waiting, they finally showed up and I got them unboxed. And I was astonished with the quality. I was even able to get them powder coated in a dark gray that closely matches the cabinets in my previous shop. And I really like the aluminum handles on the front. I think it just gives a nice high-end look. The bonus, of course, is that these are gonna last probably forever. So if I eventually do move to a new shop, which I really hope I don't, I can take these with me. After clearing out all the junk that's just been accumulating along this wall, it gave me a nice clean slate to start from. Now, I can hear the scoffs in the comments now. Must be nice to just buy these lower metal tool cabinets. These YouTubers are so out of touch. And look, I get it. Even these imported cabinets were not cheap per se. But by the time you add up the time and materials for building lower cabinets jam-packed with drawers, it's a lot closer than you think. Of course, the absolute cheapest option would be to just settle for doors on the bottom. But by the end of this video, I hope to mathematically prove that drawers are far superior. That's right, no more anecdotes or opinions. We're settling this with good old math. It would feel sacrilegious to just slap some MDF on top of these beautiful cabinets. So I'm gonna try something I didn't even know existed 5 minutes ago. I had to rent a trailer to pick this stuff up though, and could immediately tell that it was insanely heavy. While I had the trailer, I also picked up a bunch of birch plywood that I'll be building the rest of the cabinets with. That's right, I'm actually going to build something after all. With the plywood out of the way, I started to break down this Formica compact material. It's a phenolic panel that comes in a seemingly infinite variety of colors and patterns, including, hilariously, MDF. How much of a troll would I be if I picked that? But no, I thought black would be a better vibe, and man, this stuff really is heavy. Like, it doesn't even make sense how heavy it is when you go to pick it up. So I broke down both 5-foot by 10-foot sheets and got them moved inside. Listen, I don't know what that stuff is made of, but must be antimatter. These 4-foot by 5-foot sheets that I had that are just gonna be for something else are all that I could carry. Whew! Despite being made of unobtainium, it cut and milled really nicely. I may go back and add a small chamfer along the top edges though. But for now, there are things to build and a janky makeshift outfeed table to set up. It's been a little while since I've had to break down this much plywood on a table saw, and I've gotta say, despite my dust collection not being hooked up yet, this Harvey saw was an absolute dream, especially with this big eye fence. I cannot wait to actually have the shop functional so that tasks like this are even easier. Someday. Before I can get anything assembled, I wanted to prep as much as I could, including the exposed edges. I actually want to show the plywood edges on these cabinets. Crazy, I know. I just thought it would be kind of a cool contrast with what I've got planned, but like the idiot that I am, I went to fill these voids with wood filler and quickly realized that it dried a nasty orange color. So, on to option B, edge banding. It should still give me the contrast I'm looking for and will look a little nicer too.
Hey, old Granny, I'm wearing my shop shades, boy.
Shop shades, huh? I think I know what shop shades actually are supposed to look like.
Anyways, why are we using an iron? It's for clothes, you dummy.
That's true, but I'm edge banding to make this plywood look fancy. See, doesn't that look fancy? That looks so fancy, Dad. Thank you.
You're welcome. Subscribe!
When it comes to assembly of these upper cabinets, it doesn't really get much simpler than this. Butt joints, glue, and screws. When I'm done, you won't see any exposed plywood edges, except for, of course, the edge banded ones, because I'm going to inset the doors rather than overlay the doors I've always used in the past. Remember, the goal of this project is to simplify the process while not skimping on the final look of the finished project. I want to show that pretty much anyone can do this and have a shop they're proud of. One of the many beneficial things about taking care to build out your shop is that the end result should inspire you and make you want to spend time in there. But another benefit is that you get to learn and expand your building knowledge that you can then apply on other projects. So if you want to challenge yourself with a new building technique, go for it. I'm obviously a huge proponent of going above and beyond on your shop infrastructure because it all rolls up into you just being better. So whatever shop project you are tackling, don't mail it in. Take the time and build something you enjoy being around.
So before we get these cabinets mounted up on the wall, let's first talk about finishing, or maybe more specifically, it'll make sense here in a second. So like I've already mentioned, the edges of these cabinet boxes are gonna stay the natural sort of birch look, because I think it'd make a cool contrast. But every other surface that you can see on these cabinets, I want to be finished, but I don't want to finish them. I was really hoping this was going to be one shot. Ta-da! This is a roll of Formica and is the easy button for getting a nice finished surface without having to deal with paint.
What do you think of when you hear the word Formica? Is it budget countertops in a track home? Because that's where my brain goes. But there are actually some really interesting use cases for it in a shop. This thin veneer is easy to cut, or mostly easy to cut as long as you score it deep enough first, and comes in every color, texture, or pattern you can possibly think of. You just need to apply a thin layer of contact cement to the back of the veneer and whatever you're putting on, and boom. You can instantly transform any surface into a perfect uniform finish. It's no secret I prefer my shop furniture to be painted, but really it's not that I prefer the paint, just the non-bare wood aesthetic. So I'm not really sure why it's taken me so long to find out about this stuff. I did learn though that I need to let the contact cement tack up for 15 to 20 minutes before putting the two parts together, which is evident by this peeling corner here, but I made sure not to make that same mistake again. Mistake number 2 was setting the flush cut router bit too low, which shaved off part of the veneer here. Turns out a protective layer of tape and adjusting the flush trim bit way up did the trick. I applied the same matte gray veneer to all the exposed sides of the upper cabinets, including the bottoms, so that I can get them mounted up on the wall. Now, I mentioned earlier that I can mathematically prove the superiority of drawers over doors, right? Well, here goes. We first have to start with a set of assumptions. Number 1, people are inherently lazy, myself included. B, visibility of a given thing is directly related to the surface area. Think of looking at a sheet of paper on edge versus straight on. And Roman numeral 3, the total volume of a cabinet with doors is roughly equivalent to the same one with drawers. As long as we can agree on those 3 things, plus that the earth is round, let's get started. A storage cabinet has a given volume based on the internal dimensions of height, width, and depth. You perceive or see that volume through the front plane of the cabinet, aka where the door is. That front plane has an area equal to the height times the width. Stay with me, I'm going somewhere with this. If you then take those 2 numbers and create a ratio of visible surface area divided by volume, you get some number. We're going to call this the retrievability index. I would argue that maximizing the retrievability index within reason leads to better utilized storage, but does not necessarily produce the most storage volume. So with our lower cabinet example, you could do this by either increasing the top number, which is the visible surface area, or decreasing the bottom number, the total volume. This would look like making the cabinet shallower or making the doors much larger. You could see at some point they just start getting ridiculous looking and wouldn't really work in a real world scenario. If you apply that same logic to drawers, you start to see the advantages. A lower cabinet with drawers is essentially made up of a bunch of flattened, smaller volumes. The visible surface area is now the top of the 3D shape, the width times the depth, since you look down into a drawer. Additionally, a drawer is usually much shallower than they are wide or deep. This inherently creates a much higher retrievability index by default. We all know that finding something in a drawer is much easier than finding it in a cabinet, buried behind rows of other stuff. This is because the relationship between what we perceive or see and the actual storage volumes are much better balanced. So unless you want to opt for a bunch of shallow, very tall lower cabinets with doors, drawers are the clear winner in terms of how easy it is to quickly locate things in them with minimal effort, because, we're lazy. But here's the cool part. We can actually use that same math to come up with ideas to better use cabinets with doors. Like these upper cabinets, which can't really use drawers since they would obviously be so high and impossible to see into.
All right, I've got all of the upper cabinet boxes in place, and right away, I think I might have a slight problem. I kind of knew these were gonna be tall, but at 6 feet, I can barely reach kind of to the top of them. But this middle one is kind of a problem. As you can see, I can barely get my hand anywhere in here, making it really not that usable. I raised up the center, obviously to make room for the miter saw, which is gonna sit right here, but I think I might have overdone it. I mean, I guess it's not the biggest deal. I'll just keep stuff in here that I don't need to get to very much. Now, as you could probably tell, some of these cabinet openings are a little weird, like this one here on the end. And that's because we're actually gonna apply some of the math we just walked through to optimize and maximize the usability of this cabinet. So instead of traditional doors, I'm actually gonna create 3 pullouts as kind of vertical tool organizers. So think of a small hanging tool wall in 3 levels. This is gonna allow me to use the surface area of the side of this rather than just relying on the front, really get that ratio up. And I'm gonna do something very similar with these 2 openings here, which are also mirrored on the other side, so 4 total. Those are gonna be a dual-sided pullout with shallow shelves for easy access. And I actually got this idea from John at Lincoln Street Woodworks with his aptly named Drawrbinets. Is that trademark pending? They perfectly demonstrate what I'm talking about by quadrupling the visible surface area on an otherwise narrow, deep abyss of a cabinet. The rest of the openings will feature more of a traditional door, but I've got a few tricks up my sleeve for those. Now, this gaping hole right here in the center is obviously where my miter saw is gonna live. And now that I'm gonna need it a lot more on this project, building all the various inserts and pullouts, why don't we get that knocked out?
If you didn't know, I'm kind of obsessed with controlling dust from miter saws. Some would say I have a problem, but it's just who I am. And I've learned that the key to effective dust collection starts with your suction source. So I'm actually going to design this miter saw cart around this monster of a dust extractor. It's basically a shop vac on HEPA filtered steroids. So here's the plan. I'm opting for a mobile cart that's going to sit between the 2 cabinet banks up against the wall. The saw will sit flush with both sides and rest on these nifty leveling casters that I can use to dial in the exact height. Within the cart will be the monster dust extractor hidden behind a door, and next to that hopefully will be a little offcut bin where I can toss scraps. Now, when it comes to dust collection in miter saws, there are 2 things that rise to the top of importance. The first is sealed pressure, sometimes called static pressure, which is usually measured in inches of water column. This is basically how much suck the vacuum produces by measuring how high it can lift a column of water. A lot of people incorrectly assume that you need higher airflow, measured in CFM, like you want for larger tools like the table saw. But the particular spray of dust from a miter saw needs the pulling power of sealed pressure to persuade those high velocity particles to get caught by the dust chute. The second most important factor, at least in my opinion, is overall dust capacity. How big is the container that the vacuum is filling up? Since we are all inherently lazy, the bigger the container is, the less often we have to empty it, and that means more time building stuff. You might be wondering why I'm choosing to build a mobile cart for the miter saw. It's a great question, and one I keep asking myself right about now too. In my head, I thought that there may be rare occasions when I wanted to use the miter saw outside, like for the upcoming deck build I have planned for my backyard. I really don't want to be cutting down a bunch of treated lumber in my shop, so the thought of keeping the miter saw mobile seems like a good idea. What is probably going to happen though is that after I park this miter saw in that spot, it's not ever going to move. Which is totally okay. I'm comfortable with my decision if that happens, but it just might be nice to know that I can move it if I want to. But regardless of whether I'm building this as a cart or a stationary base, I need it to look nice. So I'm going to go with the same theme of finished birch edges and finished veneer on all the exposed surfaces.
One thing I'm trying to be much better about when it comes to shop furniture is to not build out the entire thing before actually using it. So this miter saw cart, as you see it now, is in its most basic form. There's no doors, there's no other features that I'm gonna add this thing to make it much more user-friendly. And I just wanna make sure that, one, it fits, which it does. 2, I wanted to make sure that the dust extractor fit in the way that I planned for it to fit. So when I went to put it in there, I realized that, it's kind of wonky the way you have to kind of cantilever it in there because of how tall this big 14-gallon Bosch dust extractor is, which I anticipated because it's so large and I kind of designed the cart around it. But after getting the hose hooked up and the power cord and getting everything situated, I realized I don't quite have enough room in there for the offcut bin and the dust extractor. So it's one of those things that looked good on paper, but in practice, it would have been a little bit too crowded. So I'll just do what I have to normally do and chuck it across the shop to the nearest trash can. Oh, another thing, when I removed that handle from the back here, I inadvertently exposed this little hose back here, which was plugged by that plastic piece. So the suction performance on this thing just wasn't very good, and I was a little bit disappointed. And then once I found the hose, I covered it up, and now this thing produces a ton of static pressure, which works extremely well, especially when paired with this new dust collector for the Makita miter saw that we offer. If you've got a miter saw and you want to cut down on the sawdust, it's not going to eliminate it completely, but it sure does make a big impact. Go check out our website. All right, with that last piece in place, I've now got the foundation set for my new shop cabinet setup, and I could not be happier. It's also bittersweet because I remember building this place and freezing my tail off, insulating the walls and running things and doing all the electrical, and to now be at this stage where we're getting ready to just organize the crap out of this, it's exciting, at least for me. I went ahead and got the drawer slides put into all of the upper cabinet cavities that are gonna have pullouts, which again are gonna utilize all of those features we just talked about retrievability index and surface area and volume. The remaining 6 cabinet cavities are just gonna be traditional doors, but again, I've got some tricks up my sleeve to show you how to really make use of those better than just a door by itself. Also, if you're wondering, this is not where the router table is gonna go, it's just here temporarily. This is where a utility sink is gonna go eventually. It's already plumbed in kind of behind the drywall there. So my thought is that the utility sink is gonna sit below this counter height so that I can extend, anything I'm cutting out over top of it. But that's the reason why these cabinets kind of extend over this blank area. But unfortunately, this is the end of part 1. Part 2, we're obviously gonna build all the inserts, we're gonna add all the doors, cover them in the same Formica, so we get this nice uniform look, and I've got so many cool features that we're gonna put in this thing. Ways to utilize space, we've got this exposed tool wall, there's gonna be 3D printing, there's gonna be custom labels cut on the water jet out of copper. You're not gonna wanna miss this. So, if you haven't already, subscribe, and keep pursuing shop greatness out there.